when a rigid HOA cop confronts a black woman in her own backyard, accusing her of violating community rules. He is confident he has authority on his side, but when she calmly reveals that she not only owns the house, but the entire property development, his arrogance shatters, and the confrontation sparks a powerful lesson in respect, humility, and justice. The neighborhood of Willow Creek Estates had a reputation that many admired from the outside. Rows of well-manicured lawns, identical fences, neatly trimmed hedges, and an almost suffocating sense of order marked the place. To the residents, it was supposed to be a haven, a model of suburban perfection. But beneath the polished surface lay something darker, a rigid homeowners association, or HOA, that controlled every detail of community life. Rules governed everything, from the color of front doors to the type of flowers allowed in gardens. At the center of this system stood Officer Bradley Mason, the man many residents referred to as the HOA cop. Though technically an enforcement officer, Bradley carried himself like a sheriff policing lawbreakers. His uniform, complete with a shiny badge and a clipboard that never left his hand, was his shield of authority. He had a sharp jaw, narrowed eyes, and a voice that always seemed one pitch louder than necessary. He thrived on catching residents committing the smallest infractions. To him, order was not simply about maintaining rules. It was about demonstrating his power. That afternoon, as he patrolled the neighborhood in his white HOA vehicle, Bradley's gaze caught something that immediately sparked irritation. Behind a tall cedar fence at the far end of the community, he noticed movement in a backyard, one that, according to his maps and documents, was supposed to be shared common property. He squinted, leaning forward over the steering wheel. There she was, a black woman, perhaps in her mid-30s, dressed in a flowing summer dress, tending to a row of potted plants. Her posture was graceful, her movements calm, and there was a sense of quiet authority in the way she handled her surroundings. She was not loud, nor was she disruptive. Yet to Bradley, her mere presence there felt like an offense. Her name was Danielle Johnson, though Bradley did not bother to recall it. Danielle had moved into Willow Creek Estates just 6 months earlier. But unlike many other residents, she kept to herself. She worked long hours, traveled often, and rarely attended HOA meetings. That made her somewhat of a mystery. Some neighbors whispered that she was too aloof, while others admired her independence. For Danielle, privacy was not just a preference, but a necessity. She had worked tirelessly to build her life, and now cherished the peace her home provided. But Bradley was not interested in her story. To him, Danielle was another potential violator. He gripped his clipboard tightly, flipping through the papers he carried, eager to prove her in the wrong. A frown formed on his face. Backyards were not private property here, he reminded himself. They belong to the HOA. She has no right to be there. As he stepped out of his vehicle, his boots clicked against the pavement with a rhythm of purpose. Bradley's entire body carried a sense of superiority as he marched toward Danielle's fence. He could already imagine the look on her face when he sighted her, the fear in her voice when he threatened penalties. That was the satisfaction he lived for, the moment others recognized his control. Inside the backyard, Danielle hummed softly, unaware of the storm approaching. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and fresh soil, and the warm sunlight cast golden patterns across the lawn. For her, this was not just a yard, it was a sanctuary. It was the one place she allowed herself to breathe freely, to disconnect from the world and reconnect with herself. She had fought too hard in her life, through years of being underestimated, through struggles others could not imagine, to let anyone disturb the peace she had built. But at that very moment, as Bradley's heavy knock rattled the wooden gate, the quiet serenity of Danielle's world was about to be tested. The sharp, rap of knuckles against wood broke the soft rhythm of Danielle's humming. She looked up from the flower pot in her hands, her brow furrowing slightly. The knock was not a neighborly tap, but a heavy, insistent pounding, one that demanded compliance. She set the pot gently on the patio table and walked toward the gate, wiping her hands on a cloth. Through the small slats of the cedar wood, she caught a glimpse of a uniform. Her stomach tightened, though not from fear. Over the months, she had grown used to whispers about the overzealous HOA officer. Still, she had hoped her quiet existence might spare her from his notice. She unlatched the gate, and it swung open with a low creak. Standing there, clipboard in hand, was Officer Bradley Mason. His expression was one of immediate disapproval, his lips pressed into a thin line as though the very sight of her in the yard was an offense. "Afternoon," Danielle greeted politely, her voice calm, though her eyes studied him carefully. "Afternoon," Bradley repeated, his tone sharp and almost mocking. "Do you know what you are doing right now?" Danielle tilted her head slightly. "I believe I am watering my plants." Bradley's grip tightened on his clipboard, his knuckles whitening. "No, ma'am, you are trespassing. This backyard is community property under HOA jurisdiction. Residents are prohibited from using it for personal activities." He spoke each word slowly, enunciating as though he were addressing a child who needed correction. Danielle raised an eyebrow, her calm demeanor unshaken. "Trespassing? This is the backyard of my home. How can I trespass on my own property?" "This is not your backyard," Bradley snapped, his voice rising. "The HOA owns and governs the common spaces. This area is shared. No resident is permitted to claim it as private. You have violated the rules, and I am authorized to issue a citation. Continued violations will result in penalties, up to and including eviction proceedings." Danielle's lips parted slightly, not in shock, but in quiet disbelief at his audacity. She crossed her arms, studying him. "You are threatening me with eviction for sitting in my backyard." Bradley nodded curtly. "Rules are rules. I do not make them. I enforce them, and everyone is subject to them." His gaze flicked over her skin, her dress, her ease in the yard, and his expression hardened further. "We cannot allow exceptions, especially not when some people think the rules do not apply to them." The implication hung heavy in the air. Danielle felt it, the thinly veiled prejudice behind his words. It was not the first time in her life that someone had judged her, not by her deeds, but by her presence. She inhaled slowly, centering herself. She knew that responding with anger would only feed his arrogance. Instead, she smiled faintly. "You seem very certain of your authority, Officer Mason. Tell me, before you knock on a woman's gate and accuse her of trespass, do you make a habit of checking your facts?" Bradley stiffened, caught off guard by her composed tone. "I know the facts," he retorted quickly. "Every property in this development is under HOA management. The yards, the sidewalks, the fences. None of it is private. It is all governed. You are no exception." Danielle stepped closer, her eyes level with his. Her voice lowered, but it carried weight. "And if I told you this land, this very backyard, you claim belongs to your board, was deeded in my name, free of your association's reach?" Bradley laughed, a short, humorless bark. "Impossible. No one owns private land here. You are bluffing." From the open gate, several neighbors had begun to watch discreetly from across the street. The confrontation had drawn curious eyes. Bradley noticed them too, and his posture stiffened, his pride refusing to allow him to back down now. He straightened his clipboard, flipping through papers. "You are in violation, and I will make my report. Do not test my patience." Danielle's eyes did not waver. "Then perhaps, Officer Mason, it is time you test your knowledge instead." Her words carried no anger, only certainty. A certainty that unsettled Bradley more than defiance ever could. The air between them grew tense, charged like a storm, waiting to break. The silence after Danielle's words was almost unbearable. Even the breeze that had earlier rustled the cedar leaves seemed to pause. Bradley adjusted his stance, attempting to mask the unease rising within him. He prided himself on always being in control, on never being challenged by residents. Yet this woman's calm certainty unsettled him. "Test my knowledge," he repeated, forcing a scoff. "Ma'am, I have been the HOA enforcement officer here for nearly a decade. I know every clause, every boundary line, every rule in the book. You, on the other hand, have clearly not read the bylaws. Now step away from this yard, or I will have no choice but to escalate the matter." Danielle regarded him with a stillness that made him shift his weight uncomfortably. She did not raise her voice, nor did she falter. Instead, she turned slowly, walked to her patio table, and picked up a leather-bound folder. Her movements were deliberate, confident, like a queen retrieving a decree. When she returned to the gate, she opened the folder and pulled out several neatly stacked documents. The embossed seals and signatures gleamed faintly in the afternoon light. She held them up, her fingers steady. "Officer Mason," she said evenly, "before you continue making accusations, you should look at these." Bradley frowned, but made no move to take the papers. "What is this supposed to be? Some printout from the internet?" Danielle's smile was small, but unshakable. "This is the deed to my property, the land, the house, and yes, this backyard. Unlike most homes in Willow Creek Estates, which were sold under lease agreements with HOA-managed land, mine is different. It is deeded in full, private, independent, untouchable by your association's rules." The words hit him like a hammer. For a moment, his carefully rehearsed authority faltered. His eyes darted to the documents, scanning the bold legal print from a distance. The sight of the official county seal made his throat tighten. But Danielle was not finished. She reached deeper into the folder and withdrew another set of documents. She fanned them out like a hand of winning cards. "And these," she continued, her tone sharpening slightly, "show ownership records for the surrounding lots. I did not simply purchase this home. I developed it. I own this land before the HOA even existed. The board leases their authority from me. I am, in essence, your landlord." Gasps rippled from the cluster of neighbors, watching from the street. One woman whispered audibly, "She owns the whole thing." Another man muttered, "No wonder she never attends the meetings." Bradley's face flushed crimson. His mouth opened, then closed, as though words had betrayed him. He reached out finally, snatching one of the documents from Danielle's hand, scanning it desperately for some loophole. His eyes raced across the legal jargon, but the truth was undeniable. Every line confirmed what she said. Danielle Johnson was not simply a resident. She was the foundational owner of Willow Creek Estates. The HOA's rules, its fines, even his own position, all of it operated under the framework she had allowed to exist. Danielle's gaze softened, though her words remained firm. "You barged into my yard, accused me of trespassing on land I not only owned but created. You threatened eviction without understanding the ground you stand on. Officer Mason, do you see now the danger of assuming authority where you have none?" For the first time in years, Bradley felt small. The clipboard in his hand seemed ridiculous, his badge meaningless. Around him, neighbors stared, their expressions ranging from astonishment to quiet satisfaction. The mighty enforcer of rules, undone by the very person he had sought to diminish. His jaw worked as he tried to summon a retort, but none came. All he could manage was a hoarse whisper. This cannot be right." Danielle closed the folder and stepped back toward her patio, her movements graceful, final. "It is right, Officer Mason. Perhaps next time, you will remember that respect should come before judgment." The storm had broken, and Bradley stood drenched in humiliation. For several long seconds, the world around Bradley seemed frozen. The only sound was the faint rustle of leaves in the early evening breeze. His clipboard, once his weapon of authority, now hung limply at his side. The neighbors lining the sidewalks watched with unblinking eyes, their whispers spreading like wildfire. "She owns the whole thing. Did you hear what she said about the deed? Unbelievable, all this time." Their voices pierced the silence, each word a sting to Bradley's pride. He had built his reputation in Willow Creek Estates as the enforcer, the man who never bent, never faltered. Yet here he stood, exposed, his arrogance dismantled in front of the very people he lorded over. Danielle set the folder of documents back on the patio table and turned toward the gathering neighbors. Her expression was serene, yet there was a subtle firmness in her voice that commanded attention. "For months, I have watched quietly," she began, her tone measured, but carrying easily across the lawn. "I have seen how rules are enforced here. I have seen the way some are treated with courtesy, while others are treated with suspicion. And today, Officer Mason came into my yard, without invitation, demanding that I leave land that belongs to me. He did not ask questions. He did not listen. He assumed." Her gaze shifted briefly back to Bradley, whose face had drained of color. He stood stiffly, as though bracing for a blow. "Assumptions are dangerous," Danielle continued. "They blind us to truth. They lead us to treat people not by who they are, but by what we presume them to be. Too often in my life, I have been underestimated, dismissed, or accused because of my appearance before a word ever left my mouth. And today it happened again, right here, in my own backyard." The neighbors grew still, many of them suddenly unable to meet her eyes. A few shifted uncomfortably, recalling their own whispered judgments about the mysterious woman at the end of the street. Bradley swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing down on him. For years, he had wielded his clipboard like a gavel, never once questioning whether his enforcement was fair or just. He had convinced himself that the rules made him right, but now he stood stripped of that illusion, forced to confront the truth. His authority had been nothing compared to the quiet strength of the woman before him. Danielle stepped closer, her voice softening, though it carried no less weight. "Respect is not a privilege to be granted when it is convenient. It is a right, a foundation. Without it, rules mean nothing. Authority means nothing. Humanity means nothing." Her words lingered in the air, sinking into the hearts of those listening. One elderly neighbor cleared his throat. "She is right," he muttered, loud enough for others to hear. Another nodded, murmuring, "I never knew. I judged her too quickly." The murmurs grew into a low chorus of agreement, the tide of opinion shifting visibly in her favor. Bradley's hands trembled slightly as he looked down at his clipboard. For the first time, it felt like a burden, rather than a symbol of power. His chest tightened, humiliation clawing at him. But deeper than that was something he had not felt in years. Shame. Real burning shame. He opened his mouth, his voice rough. "Miss Johnson." His throat caught and he cleared it. "I owe you an apology. I should not have..." His words faltered, as though even the act of admitting fault was foreign to him. "I should not have approached you in that way." Danielle's eyes remained on him, steady and unreadable. She did not gloat, nor did she smirk. Instead, she nodded once, her expression calm. "Apologies are a start, Officer Mason. What matters more is what follows them." Her statement landed with finality, like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through everyone present. The neighbors began to disperse slowly, whispering to one another. Their perspectives on both Danielle and Bradley forever changed. Some looked at Danielle with newfound admiration, others with guilt for having assumed the worst about her. Bradley, however, remained rooted to the spot, his authority shattered, forced into the uncomfortable position of reflection. As the sun dipped lower, Casting long golden rays over the fence, Danielle turned back toward her plants. Her hands moved with the same gentle care as before, as if the confrontation had not shaken her at all. But for Bradley, the world would not be the same again. The sun had nearly set when the neighborhood returned to its usual quiet, though the air still buzzed with the echoes of what had unfolded. Willow Creek Estates, so often cloaked in rigid order and whispered gossip, had witnessed something it would not soon forget. Danielle returned to her patio chair, settling gracefully as the golden light of dusk painted the yard in warm hues. The folder of documents rested beside her, untouched now, as though their presence alone was enough to remind the world of the truth. She picked up her watering can once more, tilting it gently over the soil. To anyone watching, it was a simple act, but for her it was more. It was a declaration. This was her sanctuary, her land, her life. And tonight, no one could deny it. Across the street, a small group of neighbors lingered, hesitant yet compelled to approach. One of them, an elderly woman named Mrs. Whitaker, shuffled forward, her eyes lowered. "Ms. Johnson," she began softly, her voice tinged with guilt. "I owe you an apology as well. I thought you kept to yourself because you looked down on us. I never imagined it was simply because you valued your peace. I judged you unfairly." Danielle looked up, her expression gentle. "We all make mistakes, Mrs. Whitaker. What matters is that we learn from them." Another neighbor, a young father, holding his daughter's hand, added, "You showed more grace tonight than most of us would have. Thank you for reminding us what real strength looks like." His daughter, perhaps no older than 7, smiled shyly at Danielle, who returned the smile with a warmth that melted the tension in the air. As the neighbors drifted away, whispers of admiration replacing earlier doubts, Bradley remained near his HOA vehicle. He had not moved far since the confrontation ended. The clipboard lay abandoned on the hood, forgotten. His posture was different now, no longer rigid with authority, but slumped, heavy with thought. Finally, he stepped toward Danielle's gate once more, his voice quieter than it had ever been. "Ms. Johnson," he said, his words careful, "I do not expect you to forgive me quickly, but I want you to know that today, I was humbled. I let my assumptions speak louder than reason, and I disrespected you in your own home. That was wrong. I see that now." Danielle studied him for a long moment. His face, once hard and unyielding, carried lines of weariness and shame. She nodded slowly, her voice steady but kind. "Growth begins when we admit we were wrong, Officer Mason. If this moment teaches you to look at people with new eyes, then perhaps it will serve a purpose." Her words struck him deeper than any rebuke could have. For years, he had equated strength with authority, respect with fear. Yet here stood a woman who had dismantled his arrogance. Not with anger, but with truth and dignity. He lowered his head slightly, a gesture of respect he had rarely shown. "Thank you," he murmured, almost to himself, before turning back to his vehicle. As Bradley drove away, the streets of Willow Creek Estates seemed different. For the first time in his long tenure, he questioned not the residents' compliance, but his own heart. Danielle, meanwhile, leaned back in her chair, watching the first stars appear in the twilight sky. The events of the day had been draining, yet she felt no bitterness. Instead, she felt a renewed sense of peace. She had not sought to prove herself, but when forced, she had stood firm, and in doing so, she had transformed not only her own place in the community, but the hearts of those around her. The jasmine-scented air drifted softly across her yard, carrying with it the quiet triumph of dignity reclaimed. In Willow Creek Estates, order had always been enforced through fear, but tonight, respect had been redefined by the woman who truly owned it all.